Hi there, Coach Alexa here. I had a great question in a couple of weeks back about how to train for a mountain race when you live in a very flat part of the UK. Great question. So I think the first thing to bear in mind that when you're talking about mountainous terrain, so North Wales, the Brecon Beacons, the Lake District up in Scotland, even the people that are aiming to win those races, even the professionals in mountainous terrain, are not running up the hills, they're hiking. So one of the things to think about really carefully is, can you get in some practice hiking, purposefully hiking and walking? It's a different gait pattern, it's a different muscle activation pattern, it's a different skill to running. So, getting some practice hiking with purpose, really purposefully walking in your running gear, is a really, really great place to start. Obviously, it's handy to do some training with some hills, isn't it, for a really mountainous or hilly race? And hilly races don't have to be in the mountains. I live at the very bottom of the Chilterns, and in some parts of the Chilterns there are some seriously steep kind of sections that bobble around as you're following trails and different routes. So how can you get in some hill training when you don't live in a hilly or mountainous area? Most places have undulations, so they might be small hills nearby, or they might be bridges that go over railway lines or motorways or big roads or rivers. There might be areas that have got steps, so in your town centre there might be some steps up and down somewhere. So these are great places to try and incorporate into your runs just generally. Picking a route that goes up and down that small undulation, it will all add up in your legs. If you've got access to a gym, then a treadmill where you can set that incline to be up and recreate running up a hill will be great. And the step machine is also awesome as well, particularly for more mountainous races where the elevation is that much steeper. Stepping up the step machine, not at a run, but at that power hike kind of walk, is great training for the legs. What kind of sessions can you do to get the most out of the small hills or inclines that you might have in your area? It's best to do kind of a hill repetition style session. So take a decent, good 10 plus minutes of easy effort warm up, and then up and down that hill. Getting the uphill in the legs, making sure that we look up the hill, not down at our feet, powering our elbows backwards to get good leg drive to power us up the hill. We're not looking at sprinting up the hill, we're just looking at keeping a decent pace up that hill. The breathing and the effort level will go up because of the additional effort of that uphill kind of anti-gravity effort that you're putting in. The other thing that most people don't think about perhaps as much as they should is coming back downhill again. So when people run downhill, particularly if they're not very experienced with it, we tend to be a little bit fearful of the downhill, of the acceleration that we get from the gravity of running downhill. We have a tendency to lean backwards. We have a tendency to lengthen our stride, slow down the rate at which our legs are turning over, our cadence, and that means we land with our foot a lot further out in front of us, normally in quite a heel strike, putting quite a lot of force through the knee joint in particular. So I've experienced firsthand, having entered a very hilly coastal race with not a lot of hill training, that you will find that the downhills are what really gets your legs as opposed to the uphills. So keeping that downhill technique where we're leaning slightly downwards into the hill in a nice tall posture, so not hinging at the hips, just our body is just slightly tilted downhill. We keep our legs turning over quite fast, and you try your best not to put the brakes on. Now this takes plenty of practice, particularly on steeper sections. You can even try, I don't know if you've ever seen a skier or a snowboarder coming down a steep slope, they tend to kind of traverse it like that. If it gets too steep for you and your confidence levels, then feel free to traverse it or to walk down. As I say, lot less damage on those quads mid-race than trying to stick the brakes on as you're running and leaning backwards into the hill the whole time. The other thing to think about when it comes to off-road kind of hilly mountainous races is that they are off-road. So again, if you live in quite a flat area and do most of your running on road at the moment, another aspect of kind of race specific training you'll need to think about is getting out on the trails. So I live out near the Thames Path. We've got sections of it that are really quite flat, either in a nice kind of meadow by the river, or they're kind of one of these kind of compacted kind of gravel style or sandy type trails. So they're very similar to roads, but then they're also even in a relatively built up area on the outskirts of Reading, some parts of the Thames Path that are narrower, that are a little bit kind of bumpy and lumpy, that have got tree roots, that have got rocks, and that get us having to think a bit more about where we're putting our feet, get our body used to each footfall being in a slightly different position to the last one, which is different to when we're running on the road. So another key aspect to think about when training for a trail race is get out on the trails. You know, even if they're not trails with massive elevation, being out on the trails will help with another really key aspect of your preparation for that style of kind of mountainous or hilly trail race. I hope that's helpful. Let me know any questions in the comments. And yeah, if you've got any ideas for future videos or topics that you'd like me to cover, then give me a shout. Cheers now.